Son, no sin to hide, but you have sent him from your side to walk upon this guilty sod and to become the Lamb of God. Your gift of love and crucified, lay back his sword. I serve a risen Savior, he's in the world today. I know that he's living, whatever may be said. I see his hand of mercy, I hear his voice of cheer. And just as I need him, he's always here. He lives, Christ Jesus lives today. He walks with me and talks with me. Chapter 10, where we got to, and I think we're just going to start from section 2 of lesson 10 on page 46. Last week we talked about what God gave indicates to us something of true liberality, of the things that God gave to us. So what better example could we possibly have than to pattern our giving after how God has given. By chance, did anyone in class, just raise your hand if you did anyone send me a book in the mail? I don't guess anybody did. It's a very, very strange and troubling title to it. The name of the book was A Weed in the Church. That's not very encouraging, but I looked at who wrote it, and a Baptist minister wrote it.
and it could be based on something like they got the mailing list from somebody that I have bought something from or something, but it was a little surprising to get something like that. I hope I'm more than a weed. Starting in section 2, we want to talk about in this section, and we only intentionally used half this lesson up last week so that we could be in sync with when Brother Stubblefield is going to start his lesson series, which will not be the 22nd, but I guess will be the week after that, if I remember right. But we're going to talk about this morning the dangers of riches and the danger of the love of riches. So there are two entirely different things. When we think about the danger of riches, there's things that can happen to us when we have great riches, and there's things that can happen when our thoughts and minds are on the love of riches. Money's neither, in section A, money is neither good nor bad. It's neither moral nor immoral. It is the attitude toward it that is significant. And that's a key point in our lesson this morning. It's our attitudes toward it. Poverty presents hazards and dangers also. What are some of the, what dangers of both riches and poverty did Proverbs 30:8 through 9 indicate? Anybody? I guess we could read that. If you have your Bible or phone or whatever, let's turn to Proverbs 30, verses 8 and 9. Remove falsehood and lies far from me. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with the food allotted to me, lest I be full and deny you and say, who is the Lord? Or lest I be poor and steal and profane thy name. So there's two ways to look at this. Actually 3 ways. There's I'm poor and I'm mad at the world because I'm poor, and we see a whole lot of that. The answer to poverty is not to ransack a town, bust into buildings. I have a peculiar solution to that, but the other side is avoiding all of those that might be in need because we're wealthy and we don't want to get involved with those people. And the other thing is contentment. And I think the thrust here is that we are to seek contentment, at least from these verses here. The presence and possession of material wealth is neither good nor bad. However, hazards are created and strong temptations presented by such possessions. In 1 Timothy 6, chapter 10, for the love of money, and we've all heard this 1,000 times, for the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. Some of the errors that they could pierce themselves, the sorrows that they could pierce themselves through is the loss of their riches, the loss of their family because of their pursuit of riches. And I'm not talking about, and I want to make sure nobody gets the wrong impression, there is nothing wrong with having lots of money. As long as we understand how we're supposed to use it and how we're supposed to control what we have. This is just a personal commentary, and that's all it is. But I want to tell you, I think you're seeing what the love of riches is all about in our country right now. I don't know any of the names and won't bring up any names, but I know there is one senator that his home was raided, and there were like a box full of gold bars in his house, and he had $500,000 cash in 2 different safes. You know what? I don't presume to be his judge, but I'll tell you this much: it's very suspicious that what you make, that you can accumulate that kind of wealth, and to me, it just reeks of selling yourself out. And there's many, many other cases, and it's not just politics, but we see that all the time. And I don't know of anything that's more frustrating to me than to see what is obviously corruption. And what's making it hard on our corruption that we see is that the Justice Department appears to be fully corrupted. That makes it a win-win for the crooks. But that's the kind of thing that happens when people seek wealth. They forget their purpose. Every senator and every House Representative person that's been elected has made an oath before the people and before God, and says that I will uphold my duties. Well, if you're not really upholding your duties, then I've always wondered, and I'll get off my stump here, but you know, if I go to court and I saw David involved in an accident, and David, even though I love David, David pulled out in front of somebody and that guy run into him. And if I get up on the witness stand, of course, if it went to that from an insurance claim standpoint, but if I got up on the witness stand and I said that guy pulled over and hit David, it wasn't David's fault, I have perjured myself. And I can go to jail for lots and lots and lots of time for that. But isn't it strange how people can publicly say things that they are going to do if they're elected, and they never even get close to it? Is that not perjury? Should that not be under the same stipulations that's provided in the Constitution for those that lie to a court? But anyway, I'm sorry I got off on that. Something stirred me up somewhere this morning, but I know what it was. Why would they do things like that? Because as soon as I can get in and get to where the big bucks are, then I can make it. I can make it big time. Most of these guys are flunkies and would never make it in a business anyway. If you've ever thought about it, they wouldn't know where to start being a CEO of a business, because they don't have any experience except for looking after themselves. But anyway, they that will be rich, and over on page 47, they that will be rich will fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. And that's 1 Timothy 6, 9 through 10. Now, does this say if you are rich, you just might as well hang it up? No, it doesn't say that. I'm convinced that a Christian could be a multi-billionaire and still be faithful to God, depending on how they conduct their life and how they handle the multi-billions of dollars that they have. But the point here is that when you hold back your riches, number one, your thought is more on you than it is others. And it is assuming that possibly that you made this, and you may not have the impression that God has helped you in this. Maybe God has not blessed you, but you come up with it yourself. But it says here that they fall into temptations and a snare. You know, we couldn't write down in the time we got left this morning all of the temptations that could come from having lots and lots of money. But likewise, we could also take the rest of the class and write down things, good things that we could do with lots and lots of money. And since the ones that do the good things are church leaders, then we need to make sure that they have the resources that they need to carry on the business of the church and the requirements of the church. And number 3, there's a warning here in Proverbs 23, 4 through 5. Labor not to be rich. Cease from thine own wisdom. Wilt thou set thine eyes upon that which is not? For riches certainly make themselves wings. They fly away as an eagle toward heaven. You know, we talked about people during the Great Depression last week that just committed suicide. My money's gone. What am I to do? I just don't want to live anymore. And a lot of people jumped out of windows. It's sad that some people think so much of riches that they would put their own life in front of it, or behind it, actually. 1 Timothy 6:17, charge them that are rich in this world that they be not high-minded, nor trust in uncertain riches, but in the living God, who giveth us richly all things to enjoy. I think I brought this up one time, but it has made a lifelong impression on me. Everybody has been in traffic before, and everybody's been in rush hour traffic before, and it really stinks. I hate traffic. That's one good thing about living in McMinnville. We might have 5 cars at the red light, and that's about it. But maybe wait for one light, and that'd be it. But in Nashville, there's places where you might sit to go from here to where the bypass turns to the left. You might sit for an hour and 15, 20 minutes. But there's always that special individual that wants to drive down the emergency lane. Because, see, you just don't understand. You just don't understand how important of a person I am. Now, in their minds, that's what they think. You poor people over here, get out of my way. I've got things to do. And boy, does that make me mad when they do that. But you know something I've always noticed, and I would say it 90 out of 100 times, it's either a BMW or a Porsche or Cadillac, and those are good cars. If you have one, that's okay, but I'm just saying these people are a peculiar breed. And it's always funny to see a trailer truck, see them coming, and just kind of go and move over where they can't get by. But that's the kind of thing that people do when they've got themselves centered on their riches. They have become high-minded and trust in uncertain riches.
I think we need to define riches and wealth on a personal basis.
On a personal basis,
Yeah, because, well, we need to be thinking what you would call money. People want money, who want power. But I just want a nice, simple, decent place to live, raise my children, and enough to eat and take care of. Maybe a neighbor or whoever in the church. That's personal. And Christ said this. Render unto Caesar
That's a good point. Sister Little is talking about we need to personally, within our own family, define wealth and what is wealth and poverty. And we need to remember that, well, I'll use Paul as an example. Paul said, and you know, the funny thing, I can remember what Bible verses say, but I can't remember where they are. I don't know if I'm lacking or something. I guess I am, but Paul said, I have learned to be content in whatever I have. So he's had riches, he's had poverty, but he's learned to be content with whatever the day brings. And that's a good point, and we should do that same thing also. Good batteries. There it is. In James chapter 5, 1 through 6, I'll slow down. 5 verses 1 through 6, if you would turn to that. It says, "Come now, you rich, weep and howl for your miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches are corrupted, and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver are corroded, and their corrosion will be a witness against you, and will eat your flesh like fire. You have heaped up treasure in the last days. Neither the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, cry out, and the cries of the reapers have reached the ears of the Lord. You have lived on earth in pleasure and luxury. You have fattened your hearts as in a day of slaughter. You have condemned and have murdered the just. He does not resist you." I can tell you quite a few instances in my lifetime where the person I work for would just try to squeeze, as much as he can out of possibly having to pay me overtime or something like that. I remember when I was about 18 or 19 years old, I was the leader of a crew that was doing, and I'll tell you where it is. If any of you are in Franklin and you know where Moore's Lane is, if you turn on Moore's Lane, there's a condominium project back there that used to be called, and I can't remember it, too many years. But I had that whole project, and they were having a grand opening, and we weren't working 45 hours a week. We were working like 90 to 100 hours a week. We got fussed at when we would come in late the next morning because we were just so tired we couldn't hardly get up. But I got my check. I thought, boy, I ain't no telling how much I'll make. Of course, I probably wasn't making about $4 an hour at that time, but it wasn't overtime. Now, I didn't know that I could went to the Labor Relations Board and had him nailed, but he just said, "I never told y'all I'd pay you overtime for this project." Well, you know what? Where that overtime went? It went in his pocket. Well, I also quit on the spot, but and went to one of his competitors and worked there for several years. But there's nothing more unfair than cheating the workers. The workers generally are on the low end of the totem pole. I don't mean that in a negative sense, but they're just not as wealthy as you, and you have the ability to take care of your people. It took me a lot of years to learn just how much you can do for your people that work under you. The more you do, the more compliments you give, the harder they work. And the better it is for them, and the better it is for me. It gives me a reason to go to the owner of the company and ask for a raise for them. Things work out when we're kind and when we're just. But those that got money, like this guy did, got to have a little more. Got to squeeze just a little bit more out of my help. Speaking of muzzling ox, you know who had to take over my supervisor duties? Him. And he had to do it for a long time because he couldn't find anybody else. But concerning these verses, why were the rich to weep and howl? Because their riches were corrupted and garments are moth-eaten. It says, and see, your gold and silver is cankered. And what would the rust be to them? It would be a witness against you. It says it will eat your flesh. And why had the rich heaped treasure for the last days? Now, as Christians, we've already talked about set up our treasures not here on earth, but in heaven, knowing that God knows the good that we do with our treasures, and others benefit from the use of our treasures. And when I say treasures, I'm not talking about massive amounts of money for you to give. I'm just talking about the good. I don't care if it's $20. The good that you do with the money you have, God knows about. And of course, the devil also knows, and he knows a good candidate when he sees one, and he'll use it. Who heard the cries of the poor? The Lord of the Sabbath. Sabaoth, or whatever that is. What kind of life had these rich lived? Pleasures on earth. Let's turn to Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 10 through 12. Deuteronomy chapter 6, 10 through 12. So it shall be when the Lord your God brings you into the land of which he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give you large and beautiful cities which you did not build, houses full of all good things which you did not fill, hewn out of wells which you did not dig, vineyards and olive trees which you did not plant. When you have eaten and are full, then beware lest you forget the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. I think in a nutshell, all this is saying is be aware of where your good things come from. Do you agree with that, David? Just be aware of where the good things that you have. You're not hungry. You don't covet a rich man's things to be like them. You know, it's funny how on TV the media tries their best to make everybody feel like if you're not one of these, then you're nobody. Like, I can't tell you how many foolish things I've heard said on American Idol, but they got these great music and bands and people that, well, you know what? If you're right with God, you're right. And that's all that matters. And he'll watch over you. And that's all that matters. In Joshua 7:21, what three things did he covet? He coveted goodly garments. Huh? Silver and gold. And 50 shekels of gold. And what was the results, David? Huh? That's right. And we all know the story of in Luke 18 through 25, the rich young ruler's love for material possessions. I don't know whether to feel sorry for this young man. It says young, so I'm going to call him a young man. I don't know whether to feel sorry for him or not, but I guess I have to. But here is the Lord that you've heard about that's done all these miraculous things, and you're standing in his presence. And so he figures he'll come up, and he's heard him teaching, and he comes up and he says, what must I do to be saved? What I've done all these things that you said from birth up. So what shall I do? He was probably deep down thinking of, and you done a good job too, son, I'll tell you. Thank you. That's not what he said. He said, sell all you have and give to the poor, and you shall have eternal life in heaven. And it says he walked away sorrowful because what? Great wealth. Most of us wouldn't know what great wealth is, but I'll tell you what, most of us obviously do know what it is being provided for. I don't see anybody in this church that comes to church with holes in their clothes and holes in their shoes and hair all out of whack because they don't have a comb. Everybody here is being taken care of. Being taken care of is, to me, is we are building wealth for the future and doing good things now and putting that in our savings account, if you will. That may be a crude way of putting it, but we're putting into our savings, our heavenly savings account, good deeds that we do here, and we don't worry about us. We just worry about pleasing God. So he kept his riches, and he walked away sorrowful. And in Luke 16:19, I'm saying it starts in Luke 16:19, the story of the rich man and Lazarus. A lot of people think that this is a story of, they think this is that rich man's judgment, and he's already went through the judgment. And that's a whole different subject matter for us to study maybe sometime, but his fate was sealed when he closed his eyes for the last time and drew his last breath. It should be a warning to us. He had lots and lots and lots of good things. And what did Lazarus have? He just hoped he could get some of the crumbs that fell off the table. But, he's a nuisance. I'm not going to glorify this in any other way other than to just tell you one of my favorite songs that I have ever heard is somebody that you probably won't recognize, but his name is Phil Collins. And he sings a song about, the name of the song is Another Day in Paradise. And it's a very thought-provoking song because it talks about, and I started to print off the lyrics of it, but I can tell you the gist of it. it's talking about an old woman that's laying on the street, and she tells this man that's walking by her, and he says, "Sir, can you help me? It's cold out here, and I've nowhere to sleep." And then it says that the man looked off as if he didn't see her. Y'all know that song? You never heard that song? You have? And then another person walks by, and it says you could tell by the blisters on the soles of her feet that she had moved on from place to place. In other words, hello, is this Metro Nashville? Could you come get this person laying out here in front of my store? So she gets moved on, and then gets moved on. So she's on the move all the time. She's got blisters on her feet. And the chorus of the song is, "Oh, think twice. It's just another day for you and me in paradise. Another day for you and me in paradise." Now, obviously that's not paradise, but it's just the text of the song is those that have and those that don't have. And I don't know, that's just listen to it sometime, and I promise you'll be impressed by it. It's just good lyrics. But those are the kind of people that, what's it going to hurt to help them? You know, what do we most often hear about the homeless? What's the most often statement made about the homeless? Get a job. Well, we don't know their circumstances. How do we know they even have a family? Maybe they all got killed in a car wreck. Maybe they've just all died and he has nobody. Maybe he was in the service and he come back and he hit poverty and he don't know what to do. But anyway, notwithstanding the things it could be and might have been, I just wanted to bring that up because it's a very moving song, and the lyrics are especially applicable here. Our conclusion on the love of riches: beware of covetousness, and of what does a man's life not consist, in Luke 12:15. Huh? Abundance of things, is that what you said? I can't hardly hear. But godliness with contentment is great gain. So you got those that have hustled and traded and invested, and they got lots of great riches, and they're rich. Then you've got those that have been obedient and that love God, that try to follow His commandments, and they're happy with what God's given them. It says that is great gain. Not a little gain, great gain. I think if nothing else comes from our study in this book, contentment is one thing that every Christian has to have. And we can use, like I said earlier, we can use Paul as an example. I mean, imagine, look at all the things that Paul had to go through. You know, when he talks about all of the things, when he was being accused of not being a true apostle, he named off about a list about that long of things that he had gone through. But you know what? There's about 2/3 of them we don't have any record of. So he had a hard life, but he was content. Okay, we're going to move on into section 3, and I want to make sure that we complete this lesson. It says, God loves a cheerful giver. Every man according as he purposes in his heart, so let him give, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver. I hope when we contribute, I hope that we're all doing it in in a glad way, in a cheerful way. It's hard to let money go. I remember coming home one time and I come dragging in a new leaf blower. And boy, did I hear it. And you can guess who I heard it from. I won't bring up her name. But we had this big line of pine trees, and every fall, you know, evergreens defoliate also. A lot of people think they're green forever and ever, but they also have to defoliate to make room and make space in the energy system from the roots to put on new leaves, new needles. And I was coming home every day, and it's like they're right there where the wall is, and my patio was right here, and my overhang was about 3 or 4 feet up, and my whole patio would be full. And I was just about sick of doing this. And now the needles are sticking in my broom, and I have to clean that out. So I decided I'm going to do something about that, so I went and bought me a leaf blower. First thing I heard was, how much did that cost? Seriously, how much did you just spend? You didn't ask me if I agreed with that. I said, no, because I knew you wouldn't want to do it. And she said, what possible reason do you have to buy something like that? I started that thing up in about 3 seconds. I had every bit of those needles off the patio. And she said, well, we might have a use for it. Because she had been sweeping too. Cheerful liberality results from compassion. Giving should be cheerful in every way. It is an occasion of joy to both the giver and the receiver. Now on page 48, we contrast Barnabas and Ananias, and this is Acts 4:36 says Joses, Joses, which is another name for Barnabas. But what element was absent that made the difference in these gifts? It says Barnabas gave all. What did Ananias and Sapphira give? What they wanted to. But what did they make people think that they were doing? Giving everything. You know, we could have a windfall here. You know, everybody knows that we just sold this property. Let's just keep some of it, and I mean, we can buy more property and just give part of it. And so they told everybody they're going to give all. And when they come and lay it at the apostles' feet, one at a time, struck down. Then Sapphira comes and did y'all give all? Ananias said y'all gave all. Is that true? Yes, that's true. We give all of it. Struck down. I think this is a good example of the no foolishness that's going to be expected on the day of our judgment. It's not going to be any negotiating like today. So many children want to negotiate with parents about, okay, well, why? Why do you want me to? I don't understand it. Why? I tell my grandchildren, and it really doesn't sit well with my sons, but I don't negotiate. When I say no, it's no. I don't want to hear any more about it. I've thought it out. No. Leave it there. No. But, and I'll give them a stern look, and they just walk off, and then go tell mom and daddy let them do it. But what we've got to do is we've got to remember that people like Ananias and Sapphira were trying to do good things, but they were trying to also keep their wealth, and they got it confused. They didn't realize that God would bless them for the good that they did, as he did everybody here after the church was established. But our attitude is significant. In 1 Corinthians 13:3, what element is necessary to acceptable giving according to that scripture? Love. It says charity. But that's charity is benevolent love. In Romans 6:17, ye have obeyed from the heart that form of doctrine which was delivered. The heart in it is the course of acceptable service here. We should be filled with joy at the ability to give and at the opportunity to render service. This cheerful attitude is a guideline in our giving. We need to forget about. I have heard of people leaving huge sums of money to the church in their wills. I've heard of people after they've passed away building churches out of what they left the church. But you know what? That doesn't mean that the people that give nowhere near that much, does that mean they're better in God's sight than the person that gave little? No. It's like the widow. She just gave 2 mites. That's not diddly, but it's all she had. So to her, it was a lot of money. But she was glad to do it. Our conclusion this morning, now, is the bell rung? Twice? Well, I'm still going to read this, and then we'll start in chapter 11 next week. As God has given so much, as there are such dangers in the love of riches, and as God loves a cheerful giver, we should be prompted to dedicate our possessions to building the kingdom of God here on earth. God's laws on liberality are inviolate. Will you trust him to repay you abundantly? So that concludes our lesson here. Now, as far as I know, from this point forward, we will try to cover 1 lesson a week. So I appreciate everybody's attention and look forward to seeing you next week.